The Minecraft village, home to the villagers, and the origins of one evil glitch being. He wants you. This is the story of the villager. Our story begins not too long after the fall of the great ancient civilization. The end of that grand civilization affected everyone everywhere, but no one group was more affected than the villagers. The villagers, who were once a part of that great civilization, once lived a very luxurious life within the well-fortified cities. So they were always very safe, happy, and were able to gain much intelligence. But that would all change the day that the skulk arrived. When that happened, many villagers were killed, and those that did survive were forced to flee their homes, leaving behind much of their wealth and knowledge. The villagers were now separated and very weak. However, within the next few decades, groups of these lost villagers would soon unite all across the world, and with the very limited strength that they had, together they would construct the first primitive villages. Now, these villages weren't nearly as grand as their old cities, but they did provide a place for the villagers to farm crops and stay safe from the nightly zombie siege. So, life wasn't all that great for the villagers. Also, there will be very little change to come for these poor villagers over the next 1,000 years. And so soon, the past lives of luxury that they had within their cities became nothing more than just a legend. Survival became the only goal. That was until one day, thousands of years later, a young new villager was born. This young villager was different to all the others, but no one could quite put their finger on why just yet. But regardless of that, this villager was forced to live just a normal life like all the other villagers. It would hide in the night from the zombies, and during the day it would farm whatever crops they could. But as I said, this villager was different. He didn't want to spend his entire life in fear, just like all the other villagers. Instead, he wanted to go out and try and find a way of helping his people. But when he was young, there was nothing he could really do. And so he was forced to stay in that life. That was until he became a fully grown villager. At that point, he came up with the idea of leaving the village and go looking for some sort of solution to their undead problem. Now, at first, all the other villagers warned him not to go. It was dangerous staying in the village, so it'll be even more dangerous going out there in the wild. But this brave villager didn't really care for their concerns, as he was just desperate to find a way of ending their suffering. And so, in the dead of one night, against all the other villagers' wishes, he left the village, and he went on his search. So, over the next few days, he would climb massive mountains and dive deep in coral reefs. All the while, he would forage for food and hide in dimly lit caves. He travelled the world, and he was amazed with what he saw in the land and the beauty it held. But more importantly, after a few weeks, he finally found it. The ruins of the ancient city. The legends were true. But when he found this city, it was already beginning to sink into the ground, and the skulk was still active. But this villager was careful, and he was able to cautiously navigate his way through the ancient city, rediscovering a lot of lost knowledge from the past, all of which would greatly help his fellow villagers to progress once again. And so, with all of these grand discoveries he had just found, he left the city and began heading home. He had achieved his mission. So maybe those that were warning him were just scared, as they didn't know that there was peace outside of the village. They didn't know that those legends were true. But most of all, they didn't know that there was hope. In fact, wait, no, they were right. He never should have left. You see, as that heroic villager was on his way home, he encountered something he really shouldn't have. As he encountered a creature that held ungodly amounts of power. That creature was the Herobrine. Immediately, the Herobrine attacked this villager with its raw powers, and it walked away like it had done nothing. The villager was knocked out, and the Herobrine would have probably assumed that this villager was dead. After all, it really should have been. But little did the Herobrine know, that villager didn't die. In fact, he was barely even injured. So maybe there truly was something different about this creature. Something more than just his desire to leave the village. Maybe this difference was something a bit more sinister. And that would all be revealed when he The villager, the glitch in the Minecraft Matrix. And now he could see everything. From the spirits creating this world, to the end of the dinosaurs, to the start of the ancient cities, and the start of the new villages. He could see everything. He had escaped the matrix of the Minecraft world. But before he could control it, he reverted back to his normal self. But with all of this knowledge that he had just gained, he was now certain that he could not just only help the villagers, but also take them to a place beyond their former luxury from the ancient times. And so he makes his way back to his village. However, when he returns to tell everyone what happened, no one believes him. They all think that he has gone insane and is lying. And as such, he is banished from the village. And he, not wanting to cause any harm, leaves. Eventually, he makes his way to the ocean, still very sad, almost angry in fact, that the villagers didn't listen to him. He could have helped them so much. He wanted to help them. But just as he's about to sit down to contemplate what needs to be done, it happens again. He gets another glitched experience, except this time, he gains control. He becomes one with the code. He has become the villager. And now the villager has the power of any spirit or any Herobrine or anything. He has the power of the world. And he could do whatever he wanted. And he could do it with relative ease. But luckily, most of the things he wanted to do were quite tame, as once he discovered these powers, he made sure to start giving much wealth to the other villagers, from the rare green emeralds to diamond tools and gears. And with that gift, the villagers were finally able to develop beyond their primitive lifestyles. But he couldn't do much more than that, as he was now a godlike entity, and he knew that he had to be responsible with his powers, or else the entire world would become unstable. He had seen what had happened to other worlds. Also, he had become immortal. Also, he was finally happy, as he had found a way to help his people. However, as millions of years pass, the villager just sits there, as there is nothing for him to do anymore, as everything just comes so easy for him now. And as such, he came face to face with a very unusual problem, and that was that he was beginning to have a deep hatred for immortality. But soon, he did find a solution for this strange problem, and that was setting himself a new goal. A goal of defeating the creature that awoke him to this power. He wanted the Herobrine. However, at that time, the Herobrine was long gone, and so he just had to wait patiently for its return. Millions of years later, and his prey finally arrives. But at the same time, the Steve and his friend Alex are also awoken into the overworld. Now, Steve and Alex at that point have nothing on them, so they created a plan for their survival for the deadly night. The plan was that Alex would go off and gather wood for a shelter, while Steve would stay by spawn and build a small food farm. The plan was that Alex would return by noon in order to build that shelter. However, when noon arrived, she was nowhere to be seen. Not too much of a concern though, as she may have just been mining more wood. And as such, Steve decided to just expand his farm in the meantime. But soon it gets to sunset, and Alex still hasn't returned. And now Steve is getting very worried. And so he runs into the forest, calling out for his friend. No response. He is now even more worried, and just as he's about to give up for his search for Alex, he suddenly gets teleported. And when he opens his eyes, he sees the villager. He speaks.
You opened my eyes to these powers, and now I'm going to shut you down. No more victims.
And then Steve's world crashes. There is no re-entrance. That was the final mission of the villager. He believed that you were the Herobrine. Now, you may think that the villager is still out there, waiting for another player to enter its world. But you'd be wrong, as the day that the villager attacked the Steve, it was defeated by another being. A hero almost. But to find out who or what that hero was, you'll need to watch this video.